Hello and welcome to HouseLux Estate, your go-to source for all things finance and real estate. We're here today to dive into an intriguing aspect of our economic world that often flies under the radar, yet impacts us in significant ways. We're talking about inflation. Yes, that pesky little percentage that can affect everything from the price of your morning coffee to the size of your paycheck. Inflation is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, and today we're going to unravel how it directly impacts your salary. We'll delve into the top 10 ways inflation nibbles away at your earnings, from decreased purchasing power and higher living costs to how it can make your debts feel heavier. So if you've ever wondered why your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to, or why the cost of living seems to be constantly on the rise, you're in the right place. Stay tuned to learn how inflation could be silently eating into your salary. First off, what is inflation? In simple terms, inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services is rising, and subsequently, purchasing power is falling. Think of it like this. You're at your favorite coffee shop, and your go-to latte costs $3. If inflation is at a steady 2%, next year, that same latte will cost you about $3.06. Doesn't seem like much of a difference, right? But expand that to your monthly expenses, and you'll soon realize that your dollars aren't stretching quite as far as they used to. And that's inflation in action. It's a normal part of a healthy economy, but when it gets too high, it can cause a lot of problems. Now that we understand what inflation is, let's delve into how it affects your salary. One of the most immediate effects of inflation is decreased purchasing power. But what does this really mean? Simply put, it's a situation where the value of money falls. Picture this. One day you walk into your favorite grocery store ready to buy your usual items, but suddenly, the prices have gone up. As a result, you can't buy as much as you used to with the same amount of money. That is the reality of decreased purchasing power. Inflation is like a silent thief, gradually but persistently eroding the value of your hard-earned money. Even if your salary remains the same, the rising costs of goods and services make it feel like you are earning less. It's an invisible cut to your paycheck, and it can be a hard pill to swallow. The takeaway here is that inflation can make your money less effective over time, leaving you with less buying power. In other words, your salary might not stretch as far as it used to. And secondly, inflation leads to higher living costs. Inflation is like an invisible tax that chips away at your buying power. It's a seemingly quiet force that steadily drives up the prices of goods and services over time. Imagine a shopping cart of groceries. In an inflationary environment, the same cart of groceries that cost you $50 last year might cost you $55 this year. That's inflation at work. The same goes for your monthly bills, rent, healthcare, and even a cup of coffee at your favorite cafe. Everything gets pricier. The cost of living increases, and if your salary isn't keeping up, you'll find that your money doesn't stretch as far as it used to. Suddenly, you're feeling the pinch. The monthly budget is tighter, and you may need to rethink your spending habits. This means your salary may not cover your living expenses as comfortably as before. Thirdly, inflation can erode your savings. Now you might find yourself wondering, how does that happen? Well, imagine you've managed to put away a tidy sum in your savings account. You're feeling pretty good about it, right? But here's the kicker. As inflation rises, the purchasing power of every dollar you have saved diminishes. Let's imagine a scenario. You've got $1,000 stashed away. A year passes and the inflation rate has risen by 3%. Now, that $1,000 can only buy you what $970 could have bought you at the start of the year. That's $30 less in value. So while you're diligently saving, the sneaky thief called inflation is quietly chipping away at the value of those savings. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. This means that the money you're setting aside may not be as much as you think. Fourthly, inflation increases investment risks. Now let's talk about how this plays out. When inflation is on the rise, the value of money declines. This means the returns on your investments might not be what they seem at first glance. Imagine you have an investment that promises a 5% return. Sounds good, right? But if the inflation rate is running at 3%, your real return is only 2%. That's a significant difference. It's also worth noting that inflation can lead to higher interest rates, making it more expensive to borrow money. This can reduce corporate profits and lead to lower stock prices. If you're heavily invested in stocks, this can eat into your returns. Inflation risk is a real concern for bond investors too. If inflation is higher than expected, the fixed interest payments from bonds become less valuable. So while investing is a key way to grow your wealth, inflation can make the waters a bit murkier. This means that your investments may not yield as much profit as you'd hoped. Fifthly, inflation can lead to wage stagnation. Now, what does that mean? Wage stagnation is a situation where salaries don't keep pace with the rising costs of goods and services. In other words, your paycheck might remain the same year after year, but the price of your morning latte, your weekly grocery haul, or your annual vacation keeps going up. This is a particularly tricky situation because it's not always visible at first glance. You might be getting the same amount on your paycheck, but your purchasing power, or the volume of goods and services you can buy with that paycheck, is dwindling. In many cases, employers might find it difficult to increase salaries at the same rate as inflation. They may be dealing with their own set of inflation-related challenges, such as increased operational costs. And this, in turn, can lead to wage stagnation. This means that while prices are going up, your salary isn't. Sixthly, inflation can increase your debt burden. Let's take a moment to unravel this concept. If you're carrying a significant amount of debt, such as student loans, mortgages, or credit card balances, inflation can make the real cost of that debt heavier. Here's why. The purchasing power of money decreases with inflation, but the amount you owe doesn't shrink accordingly. So imagine you took a loan a few years ago when the purchasing power of the dollar was higher. Now, with inflation, each dollar you earn is worth less, but the dollar amount of your debt remains the same. It's like you're running on a treadmill that's slowly increasing in speed. You're working harder and harder, but you're not moving forward any faster. In fact, you may even find yourself falling behind. Inflation, therefore, doesn't just erode your purchasing power or savings. It can also inflate your debt burden, making it harder to pay off what you owe. This means you could end up paying more than you borrowed. Seventhly, inflation can affect your retirement planning. As the cost of goods and services rises, the value of your savings and pension plans can diminish. Imagine saving a certain amount for retirement, only to discover that, due to inflation, the purchasing power of your savings has significantly decreased over time. This is akin to a hidden tax that erodes the value of your retirement nest egg. Pension plans, too, can be impacted. If your pension is not inflation protected, the amount you receive each month may not keep pace with rising living costs. This can lead to a tighter budget during your golden years, a time when you should be enjoying the fruits of your labor. Moreover, inflation can disrupt your retirement planning by making future financial needs harder to predict. As prices fluctuate, it becomes challenging to estimate just how much you'll need to maintain your desired lifestyle after retirement. This means that you may need to save more for retirement than you initially planned. Eighthly, inflation can lead to increased taxes. It's a rather sneaky effect known as bracket creep. Here's how it works. As your salary increases to keep up with the cost of living, you might move into a higher tax bracket, even if your purchasing power hasn't actually improved. Now imagine this. You're making more money on paper, but that extra cash isn't stretching as far as it used to. But despite this, you're taxed as if you're wealthier. That's bracket creep. It's like a stealth tax hike, and it's an unfortunate side effect of inflation. In some countries, tax brackets are adjusted or indexed to account for inflation. But not all of them do this, and even in those that do, the adjustments may not keep pace with actual inflation rates. So, what's the takeaway here? Inflation doesn't just erode your purchasing power, it can also silently push you into a higher tax bracket. This means that you could end up paying more in taxes. To sum up, inflation affects your salary in multiple ways. It nibbles at your purchasing power, making your hard-earned dollars stretch less and less. It elevates the cost of living, requiring more of your paycheck to cover basic necessities. It slowly erodes your savings, diminishing the value of your nest egg. It presents risks to your investments, potentially undermining your financial security. It contributes to wage stagnation, making it challenging to keep up with rising costs. It increases your debt burden, making loans and credit cards more expensive. It complicates retirement planning, requiring you to save more to maintain your lifestyle in your golden years. And it could potentially lead to increased taxes, taking yet another bite out of your paycheck. Understanding these impacts can help you make informed financial decisions. Thank you for watching. If you found this information useful, please subscribe to House Lux Estate for more content like this.